criminal referrals may actually be coming from Congress. The January 6th committee is holding an unusual weekend meeting this weekend. They're going to discuss this forthcoming report and something many are interested in, the possible criminal referrals they can choose to send to the DOJ. Chairman Thompson says they are mulling this. Some outlets have been reporting that the committee will likely refer Donald Trump himself and other individuals. The committee is weighing referrals for more than one person. We believe that could include, for example, John Eastman or Jeffrey Clark. Mr. Eastman, the coup lawyer, already has his share of DOJ problems that you see on the screen, whether he is referred or not by Congress. There he was having his phone searched by duly authorized agents under a warrant because, among other things, he tried to help Donald Trump commit a coup to stop President-elect Biden from coming into office. It is with that context, call it history, call it living history, call it full disclosure, that we turn to someone who's worked for President Biden, former White House press secretary, and now our MSNBC colleague and host, Jen Psaki. Nice to see you here in Washington.
Thanks for coming to D.C.
Happy to be here.
Lovely place.
I mention this because you have been at the center of all of this. Yeah. I think sometimes it gets normalized and laundered that we don't fully reflect. The reason Mr. Eastman's having his phone searched there is because there was an unconstitutional and possibly criminal, the courts will decide, effort to stop President Biden from coming into office. One of the first times that's happened. And so when you look at what this committee is doing before they hand off the gavel this weekend, what do you think is important about that process, the criminal referrals, and of course the report that's also expected?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important not to normalize it. What happened on January 6th and all of the events were a horrible moment in our history, and this is all a reminder of that. I would say what's important about this is the audience. The audience here, Ari, is not the Justice Department. And I've talked to them about this. Nobody in the Justice Department is sitting around waiting for the referral. They are not sitting around and all of them watching the hearings. They're doing their own work. At the same time, the committee has done incredibly important work in informing and educating the public. That is the audience. That's what's important here. We don't know how referrals will impact or influence the public, but what is also true is that the hearings the committee has done very effectively, frankly, they far surpassed my expectations, I think many people's, in terms of the impact they'd have on the public, moved the public view by about 5 points, but that's who this is targeted toward.
Well, it's so interesting because that's why I wanted to speak to you about this. We talked to lawyers about, as we just did to Mr. Flannery, about the court process.
Yeah.
You don't need to hear it from me. There are people who say that you were an effective communicator in government. The president,
some people say the otherwise. I'd say the opposite.
You can find both, especially in this town. You can find
both, yes.
The president certainly felt that way about you, and I think that goes to the communication of what is the window of reasonable outcomes in political science, something they call it the Overton window. How do you get people to say, oh, this is on or off the table? You know? And so I'm curious what you think about the referrals, which, as you mentioned, are not at all binding on DOJ, and this coming report. To put in the window the idea that if there is evidence that government officials or the former president should be indicted, that should be on the table or in the window and not automatically out of bounds where people say, gosh, I don't know, it's never happened, it sounds bad. Which to me, again, you know my job, I'm not prejudging what that evidence is, but do you think the committee's task in these next 2 weeks is to make sure that certain things are in that window?
Absolutely. And I think nobody can say, oh, there's never been precedent for doing these type of referrals. There also isn't really precedent, or not that I'm aware of an insurrection on the Capitol that the President of the United States was involved in. So I think what the committee needs to do, which they clearly have been carefully considering, is make sure that their referrals or whatever they're announcing publicly in their report meets exactly the bar of what this event requires, right? Clearly, Benny Thompson got ahead on the communication side of where the decision-making is. And before I came to talk to you...
Is that a nice way of saying you think he fumbled?
Well, I don't know if it was a fumble. We'll see what they decide. But getting ahead means they hadn't made the decision yet. And I checked in with one of the staffers from the committee today, and I said, "What should people know? I'm going to go talk to Ari today." And he said, "Make it clear that nothing has been decided yet. They have this meeting on Sunday." And so Benny Thompson got a little ahead of that.
Well, let me jump in and then have you conclude the point. I think that's important for viewers to know. I showed, you know, it's one of these things of we're showing what's out there but not confirming it. I showed that some outlets are saying, oh, they are likely to refer Trump. that alone will be a big deal if it happens. But I can also report to viewers that the committee has not even held the internal meeting on Sunday, let alone the later public meeting that would formalize that. So when you see a headline that says they might do that, that's not them doing it yet, to your point about whether the chairman has communicated that to the public.
Right. And they're clearly considering it and seriously considering it. But this meeting on Sunday is important, as is their report that will follow in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. There's so much to get to. I want to bring in something else. So Jen stays as part of our special show. I want to tell folks, as a reminder, I am writing a foreword to the January 6th committee's full report. You can find it by going on Amazon or wherever you get your books to search Melber Jan 6. So you can go to melberbook.com. It will have my originally reported essay on this. And as I always tell folks, if you don't want to buy it or that's not your thing, it will also be available for free online from the committee. We are going to be watching the report as news one way or another. Coming up, we turn to some surging optimism after the big Democratic midterm win this week and the surprise move from Senator Sinema. Why it is not actually as big as some has made it sound, and why Jen Psaki stays, because we're going to get into that. By the end of the hour, well, it's a special Friday here in Washington because we have someone on fallback we think a lot of people appreciate.
The bag's got one big storage area, and then there's 60 separate pockets within the area.
I can...
That's fine. Get away from me, Gary.
I'm Mom, and I want to shoot down everything you say so I feel good about myself.
Am I violent?
I'm an uptight...
Welcome back. Jen Psaki still with me. And this is one of those days where if you're on your phone and you get a phone alert, you say, oh, my God, was this big news? I just heard the Democrats increase their majority, but now all of a sudden, Arizona Senator, longtime Democratic senator, at least when she was in office, Sinema, announcing that she is switching her party affiliation to independent. Now, Sinema's action does not actually change the Democrats' power in the Senate. Indeed, there's a lot of evidence that has more to do with how she is eyeing her 2024 re-election. Now, something that liberals wanted to do was primary her. She voted against, for example, the minimum wage increase. Arizona Democrats censured her when she was part of the push to stop a voting rights bill, and also blew up Democrats' plans to raise certain taxes on wealthier Americans. She's also, at times, used her special, powerful, leveraged role to kind of just be totally cryptic about what she's going to do, which has gotten her satirized on SNL.
On one side, we have the moderate Democrats, Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona.
What do I want from this bill? I'll never tell, because I didn't come to Congress to make friends. And so far, mission accomplished.
Punchlines keep coming. Jen Psaki's still here. I say that quite literally, that you look on your phone, the headlines wrote it big.
Yeah.
But as someone who's been exactly in this scuffle between the Biden White House and the Senate Democrats, what, if anything, does this mean?
I think everybody can take a deep breath who's worried about this here. First of all, Sinema's going to vote how she votes. She'll still be a pain in the neck to progressives. She'll still be unpredictable. She'll still want to be in the center of attention. So that will drive a lot of people crazy. But she made clear in her interviews that she's going to caucus with the Democrats. That's good news. That means Democrats will still control committees, which is a big deal, getting judges through, getting nominees through. Where this is tricky, and you touched on this, Ari, is 2024. Does she run as an independent? Is she trying to back Schumer and the Democrats up against a wall where they may not want to support a Democrat running because she could be a spoiler and make it easier for the Republicans? That's not a today decision. As of now, I think people can take a deep breath about what this will mean for the next Congress.
Do you know, did Joe Biden find her more annoying than Manchin, or vice versa?
Depending on the day, Ari.
Depends on the day. Spoken like a press secretary. Really, really interesting to get a little context there, because some of it just blew up that way.
Right. You see a headline, it's like, feels like everything's over after the big win for Democrats in Georgia.
I wanted to have you reflect on something that actually we all experienced along with Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid on the runoff night, which is one of those busy nights, so many things flying around. And Rachel led a little bit of a conversation about something that I think is really relevant, which is how Georgia's evolved. We've seen that not only politically, but does culture follow politics, or does politics follow culture? We think sometimes around here the latter. So I wanted to talk to you about this. Let's take a little look at this moment, Rachel, Joy, and others, on the runoff night.
I think it's also worth appreciating that Atlanta is the cultural capital of America right now. That Atlanta is the hippest, coolest, best-looking, most forward-leaning.
Thanks, Tyler Perry.
I mean, Atlanta is the cultural leader of the United States in a lot of different parts of the arts right now, and in a lot of the creative economy. You see that
were maybe a few years ago.
Yeah.
And this several Warnock runoffs has sort of reminded people there's much more to Georgia. So I wanted your reflection on that. And shout out to all my colleagues and the bars that they were considering. And Alex Wagner cited the great Outkast and Goody Mob. We actually have a brand new song from another Georgia artist, Gucci Mane, which is brand new. And he says, y'all say I'm crazy, maybe a little bit, but some of you voted for Herschel Walker, you idiots.
Yeah.
And that's coming from, again, him speaking out about his own community and saying, how could you even do that? And so there's so much to unpack there. Just curious your reflections on all of that.
I mean, I loved that moment so much. I mean, because it reflects so many things. One is, to your point, Georgia is no longer this deep red state that is run politically by old white conservatives. It's just not. At the same time, the Republicans also made a massive mistake here, and a lot of people spoke about this on election night that we were all a part of, making the assumption that
black swagger. You know what I mean? Like, you see that confidence.
You made that point.
You see national Democratic leaders, particularly black women leaders, coming out of Georgia, specifically coming out of Atlanta, who are leading the country in every other way. And that is because that city is sort of the pulsing, throbbing heart of the country in terms of culture and ideas.
And I'm going to say this as somebody from Brooklyn, so it hurts me to say it.
Oh, no,
a lot of people would argue that Atlanta is also the capital of Black America. A lot of people would say that. They're going to argue it. Now, Brooklyn is going to fight it. Atlanta is, in a sense, the capital of
Goody Mob, Outkast. I'm going to play my Ari Melber role.
Listen, somebody's got to play this role.
Shout out looking for a hat to put on.
A little hip-hop hat. Shout out to all of it. I also feel that personally, as a resident of Brooklyn, currently the Brooklyn-Atlanta point, but I wanted to reflect on this with you. You have been, as mentioned, in the service of a president who had a broad, diverse coalition. Georgia is so often reduced to a kind of a cliched version of what may be part of the state's politics.
Black people would vote for Herschel Walker just because he was a black man who was a football hero, right? And not.
I think the former President Trump and Lindsey Graham both seem to almost directly assert that.
Yes. Offensively. I mean, horribly. And they were wrong. And so I think Atlanta, I have not spent a lot of time working in Georgia politics, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about it and talking to people there recently. It is a cultural center. It is a political center, and it will certainly be. It is a music center, which I know you will talk more about. And it is so different from the perception. I'll also say from a larger, because I've spent a lot of my career working on campaigns around the country, traveling around the country, and this point about have you ever been to the state? Do you know anything about it? Sometimes we get a little hooked up here in Washington, in New York, and other places, and making assumptions about what people think in states in the country. Oftentimes we are wrong because culture evolves, politics evolves, and that's an important thing to be mindful of as we are already in the 2024 election, I would say, Ari.
Such great points, which is why I kind of wanted to reflect on you with it a minute when we weren't in the middle of the heat of the runoff night and the Kornacki at the big board. And you make so many important points, Jen, and I think it also goes to everyone keeping an open mind, right? We say, oh, we looked at this data or this poll or this song, as I mentioned, but there's a lot going on there. When we listen to people on the ground, you get a richer perspective. So I love that going into the weekend, and I appreciate you coming on the beat.
Great to be here, Ari. Thanks for coming to D.C.
Anytime.
Come back again.
There we go. Thanks to Jen Psaki. As mentioned, we are in Washington. We have, well, one of the stars of Depicting Washington, Tony Hale from HBO's Veep. But coming up, we look at power and fairness. I want to show you something that Kornacki and I both cameo in, but it's more than that. It's a documentary about one of the biggest issues in equity and student loan debt in America, and it's next.
This holiday,
Happy holidays.
get extra merry